The sun rose slowly over the rolling fields, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. In the quiet of the early morning, a poor farmer named Thomas began his day as he had done for many years. His small farm lay on the edge of the frontier, a stretch of land where wild grasses met the dense forest. Every day was a struggle for survival. The soil was often stubborn, crops sometimes failed, and money was always scarce. Yet Thomas did not complain. He worked with a steady determination, believing that hard work and kindness were worth more than gold. Thomas lived alone. He had no family nearby, only a few neighbors who lived scattered across the countryside. Despite his poverty, he carried a heart full of compassion. He believed in helping others whenever he could, even when his own life was difficult. His routine was simple. Rise with the sun, tend to the crops, repair the fences, and make sure there was enough food for himself. Each day was long and exhausting, but it gave him a sense of purpose. One warm morning, Thomas set out to check the northern edge of his land. The forest there was thick and wild, and most people avoided it, believing it to be dangerous. Thomas, however, had learned to respect its life and quiet beauty. He moved carefully, stepping over fallen branches and listening to the soft rustle of leaves. Suddenly he heard a faint sound, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. It was a small, frightened voice calling out, a sound that did not belong to the forest. Thomas paused and listened. The voice called again, this time a little louder, trembling with fear. His heart quickened. He followed the sound, pushing through the underbrush until he came to a small clearing. There, huddled against a tree, was a young girl. Her clothes were torn and her face was streaked with dirt and tears. Her dark eyes were wide with fear as she clutched her arms around herself. Thomas froze for a moment, taking in the sight. She was a child, no more than 12 or 13, and completely alone in the wild forest. "Hey there," Thomas said softly, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "I won't hurt you. You're safe." The girl flinched, her eyes darting to the shadows of the trees. She spoke a language Thomas did not understand. Her words were rapid and urgent, full of a fear he could feel in his chest. Yet even without understanding, he knew she was scared. He knelt a few steps away, keeping his hands visible, showing he meant no harm. "I'm Thomas," he said. "I can help you." "Can you come with me?" The girl hesitated, looking between Thomas and the forest as if weighing her options. Finally she nodded slightly, her trust forming slowly. Thomas smiled gently and extended his hand. She took it, her grip weak but determined, and together they walked back toward his farm. The journey was slow. The girl stumbled several times, and Thomas supported her with a steady arm. He offered her water from his canteen and some bread he had packed for his own breakfast. She ate cautiously, her eyes always on him, studying his movements, learning that he was kind. When they reached the small wooden house, Thomas opened the door and gestured for her to enter. The girl stepped inside, looking around with wide eyes. The house was modest, with a few pieces of furniture, a small fireplace, and shelves holding jars of preserved food. It smelled of smoke and earth, a warm, homey scent that contrasted sharply with the cold forest. "You can rest here," Thomas said. "I'll make some food and then we can figure things out." The girl nodded again, her eyes softening slightly. She did not speak, but her body relaxed for the first time since Thomas had found her. He brought her a warm meal, sitting nearby as she ate slowly. She seemed wary, but the fear in her eyes was fading, replaced by a quiet curiosity. Thomas did not push her to speak. He knew trust could not be rushed, and he was willing to wait. Over the next few days, Thomas helped the girl recover. He cleaned her cuts, washed the dirt from her hair, and offered her clean clothes. She began to smile occasionally, a small, shy smile that made Thomas's heart lift. He learned her name was Ayala, though he still did not understand her words fully. They communicated through gestures, shared glances, and small acts of care. Slowly, a bond began to form between them, a bond built on trust, kindness, and shared solitude. Life on the farm became a little brighter with Ayala there. She helped Thomas with simple tasks, carrying water from the well, feeding the chickens, and learning how to tend small plants. Thomas taught her gently, showing patience when she struggled. He admired her courage and resilience. Despite the fear she had faced, she was determined to learn, to survive, and to adapt. Evenings were quiet and peaceful. They would sit by the fire, Thomas mending tools while Ayala watched, her small hands busy with simple tasks. Sometimes she would hum a soft tune from her home, a song of her people. Thomas listened with respect, not understanding the words but feeling the emotion behind them. These quiet moments became a source of comfort for both. Yet despite the growing peace, Thomas could not ignore the tension that lingered outside his small home. The frontier was vast and rumors traveled quickly. People spoke of an Apache child seen near the settlement. He knew that her tribe, and perhaps even her father or chief, might come looking for her. He worried about what would happen if they found her, if they came with anger instead of understanding. The thought made his chest tighten, but he resolved to protect her as best he could. One morning, Thomas woke to find Ayala standing at the edge of the field, looking out toward the distant hills. She seemed troubled, her small hands gripping the wooden fence tightly. Thomas approached slowly, sensing her unease. "Do you miss your home?" he asked gently. Ayala nodded, her eyes glistening. She spoke in her language, her voice trembling, but Thomas understood the meaning in her expression. She was torn between the safety she had found with him and the life she had left behind. Thomas felt a pang of sympathy. He knew that no matter how much she grew attached to the farm, her heart still belonged to her people. He knelt beside her and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're safe here," he said softly. "I will keep you safe. I promise." Ayala looked up at him, and for the first time Thomas saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. She seemed to understand that he truly meant what he said. In that moment, an unspoken bond formed between them, a bond of trust, courage, and mutual care. Days turned into weeks, and Ayala began to adapt more to the life on the farm. She laughed softly when Thomas told her stories, and she helped with chores with more confidence. Thomas found joy in her presence, a light in his otherwise lonely life. Yet he could not ignore the outside world. The thought of her tribe searching for her remained, a quiet shadow over their growing happiness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with deep reds and purples, Thomas and Ayala sat on the porch. He watched the fireflies dance in the warm evening air, while she traced patterns in the dirt with a small stick. The peaceful scene was a rare moment of calm, a fleeting treasure in a world that could be unpredictable and harsh. Thomas knew that the time might come when they would face challenges beyond their farm, challenges that could test their bond and courage. But for now, he allowed himself to simply enjoy the moment, grateful for the trust Ayala had placed in him and the small joy she had brought into his life. In the quiet of that evening, with the stars beginning to sparkle in the night sky, Thomas felt a quiet determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them. He would protect Ayala, guide her, and stand by her side no matter what. Their journey had only just begun, and though the future was uncertain, he knew one thing clearly: together, they were stronger than fear, loneliness, or danger. And so, in the gentle glow of the twilight, a poor farmer and a brave young Apache girl began a journey that would test their courage, their hearts, and the bonds of trust they had built. The forest whispered around them, the wind carrying secrets of the world beyond the farm, and Thomas understood that this was only the beginning of a story that neither of them would ever forget. The next morning, the farm was quiet. Thomas and Ayala had settled into their routine once again. Ayala helped with the chores, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, while Thomas repaired the small fences and tended to the vegetables. The air was crisp, filled with the fresh scent of earth and growing plants. The calm of the morning made Thomas almost forget the worry that had been pressing in the back of his mind, the worry that her tribe might come looking for her. It happened faster than he could have imagined. A distant sound of hooves reached his ears, growing louder with each passing moment. Thomas straightened immediately, his heart beating faster. He had always known that the world beyond the farm could be unpredictable, but this was something he had feared for weeks. From the top of the hill, a group of riders appeared, moving swiftly across the fields. Their clothing and horses were unfamiliar, and Thomas's stomach twisted with anxiety. As the riders approached, he realized who they must be. Ayala's tribe. Among them, a figure stood out, a man taller than the others, moving with authority and confidence. His eyes were sharp, scanning the land as if searching for something precious. Thomas recognized immediately that this must be the chief, or perhaps her father. His heart sank, knowing that their peaceful days might be coming to an end. Ayala froze when she saw the riders. Her small hands gripped Thomas's arm tightly, her dark eyes wide with fear. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Thomas knelt beside her, offering a comforting hand. "It's all right, Ayala," he said softly. "Whatever happens, I'll be here with you." The riders reached the edge of the farm. The chief dismounted first, his eyes scanning the small house. His gaze landed on Thomas, and Thomas met it without flinching. There was no aggression in his stance, only a firm resolve. He had promised to protect Ayala, and he would keep that promise, but he knew he had to respect the chief's authority as well. The chief spoke, his words sharp but not unkind. Thomas could not understand them, but he sensed the meaning. Ayala stepped forward, trying to speak, and the chief turned his attention to her. The girl's small voice carried fear, hope, and defiance all at once. Thomas could see the struggle in her eyes. She wanted to stay, but she also felt the pull of her tribe, the loyalty that had been taught since her earliest days. Thomas knew he could not interfere with the bond between a father or chief and his child, but he could try to help them understand. He spoke gently, hoping his calm tone would convey his intentions. "I've cared for her," he said slowly, pointing to Ayala. "She's safe here. I did what I thought was right." The chief studied him carefully, his expression unreadable. He approached Ayala and looked at her closely. She lowered her eyes, nervous but steady, and waited for his decision. Thomas held his breath, feeling the tension in every part of his body. He had done his best, but he knew that some decisions were not his to make. The chief spoke again, and this time Ayala responded. Their voices rose and fell in rapid conversation, a mixture of words Thomas could not understand. Yet even without understanding the language, he could sense the deep love and concern behind the chief's words. He realized that Ayala was not a passive figure in this moment. She had her own thoughts, feelings, and desires, and she was trying to make them heard. After what felt like an eternity, the chief turned back to Thomas. There was a long pause, and then he did something unexpected. Instead of taking Ayala forcefully, he extended a hand toward Thomas. The gesture was simple, yet it carried weight. It was a sign of respect, an acknowledgement that Thomas had cared for his daughter and acted with honor. Thomas felt a mix of relief and gratitude, understanding that the chief recognized his intentions even if their worlds were different. Ayala stepped forward slowly, her hand trembling slightly. She looked at Thomas, then at the chief, and finally back at Thomas. In that quiet moment, she made a choice that surprised no one more than Thomas himself. She chose to stay, not out of defiance, but out of trust and love for the man who had saved her and given her a safe home. The chief nodded, a small, approving smile crossing his face. He spoke softly to Ayala, and she responded with a quiet promise. Thomas did not understand the words, but he could see the bond between father and daughter remained strong, even with the distance now between them. The chief mounted his horse, gave a final nod to Thomas, and rode away with his people. The tension that had gripped the farm for weeks slowly eased, leaving a deep sense of relief. Ayala turned to Thomas, her eyes shining with gratitude. She stepped close and hugged him tightly, a gesture full of trust and affection. Thomas held her gently, feeling the warmth of her small body against his. In that moment, he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, their bond had become unbreakable. Life on the farm returned to a new normal. Thomas and Ayala continued their routine, but now with a deeper understanding of each other. Ayala's confidence grew each day, and she began to explore the land with curiosity and joy. She learned more about farming, helping Thomas plant new crops and care for the animals. In return, Thomas learned from her stories of the forest, of her people, and of the world beyond his farm. Evenings were filled with quiet companionship. They would sit by the fire, sharing small meals and listening to the sounds of the night. Ayala would hum her songs, and Thomas would listen, feeling the peace and harmony of their shared life. The farm, once a place of struggle and solitude, had become a home filled with hope, learning, and love. Yet Thomas never forgot the lessons of the past. He remained aware of the world outside the farm, understanding that life could change in an instant. He taught Ayala how to stay alert, how to respect the land, and how to navigate challenges with courage. In turn, Ayala showed him the strength of her spirit, her ability to adapt, and her unwavering trust in him. Together, they became a team, each complementing the other, each finding joy in their shared journey. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Thomas and Ayala worked together in the garden. She laughed as she carried water to the plants, and he smiled, feeling a rare lightness in his heart. He looked at her and realized that she was no longer just a rescued child. She had become a part of his life, a bright presence that transformed his lonely days into something meaningful and beautiful. The days passed, seasons changed, and the farm flourished. Thomas and Ayala faced challenges, of course. Storms that threatened the crops, wild animals that wandered too close, and the occasional wandering traveler who asked questions about the girl. But through it all, their bond remained strong. They faced the world together, learning, growing, and supporting each other in ways neither had imagined possible. Thomas often reflected on the events that had brought them together. He thought of the fear in Ayala's eyes when he first found her, the uncertainty of whether her tribe would return, and the courage she had shown in choosing to trust him. He realized that their story was not just one of rescue, but of mutual respect, understanding, and the power of compassion to bridge worlds. Ayala, too, learned from her experience. She learned that kindness could be found in unexpected places, that bravery was not just in fighting or fleeing, but in trusting and opening one's heart. She learned to appreciate the simple joys of life on the farm, the warmth of the sun, the taste of fresh bread, and the quiet moments shared with someone who truly cared for her. As the years passed, Thomas and Ayala's lives became intertwined in ways neither could have predicted. Their story was one of courage, trust, and the unbreakable bond that forms when two people face the world together. And though the outside world remained unpredictable and sometimes harsh, they knew that within the walls of the small farmhouse and the rolling fields beyond, they had found something rare and precious, a home, a friendship, and a love that could withstand any challenge. Even in the quiet moments, as they watched the sun set behind the hills, Thomas would glance at Ayala and smile. She had grown into a strong, confident young woman, carrying with her the lessons of both her worlds, and Ayala would look back at him, her eyes full of gratitude and warmth, knowing that their paths had crossed for a reason, and that together, they could face whatever the future held. In the end, it was not the hardships, the fears, or the uncertainties that defined their story. It was the choices they made, the trust they shared, and the courage to care for one another. Thomas had saved Ayala from danger, but she had also given him something equally valuable, a sense of purpose, a companion for the journey of life, and a reminder that even in the simplest of lives, extraordinary bonds can form. And so, on the quiet frontier, where the fields met the forest and the wind whispered secrets of the past, a poor farmer and the Apache girl he saved built a life together, proving that kindness, courage, and trust could overcome fear, difference, and uncertainty. Their story became one of hope, a tale whispered among neighbors and travelers alike, reminding all who heard it that the heart's true strength is measured not by wealth, power, or status, but by the courage to protect, to trust, and to love.